Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Flipboard, to our event tonight. Our first event for marketers. About a year ago, we started an initiative called FlipMarketer, and that was an initiative to reach out to people in marketing and communications and social media because we saw so many of them using Flipboard. Who here has Flipboard on a phone or another device? Great. If you don't have it, just go to the App Store. It's free and download it. It's a way to catch up on anything you're interested in. And in addition to reading about your interests and passions, you can also collect stories you're interested in. And that's what some of the marketers and brands are doing on Flipboard. We see thought leadership magazines on all kinds of topics, sometimes with blog content, sometimes with content curated from all over the web. We see PR agencies creating clipping reports. Here's Voce's. And you could just like flip anything in, any story in from the web or from your phone. We see brands creating brochures, sometimes even catalogs where you can shop, or artists who create a portfolio, or even landscape architects creating portfolios. So we started to see these examples, and we wanted to share them. You can follow us on Flipboard. Our account is FlipMarketer. That is also our name on Twitter. And as we started to reach out to our community, we came across Voce. I just showed you their magazine, and we started talking about like what could be an interesting topic for the audience that we both communicate with. And with this, I want to hand it over to Randy, my co-host.
Great, thank you. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming. Really excited for tonight. I've been a fan of Flipboard probably for about 5-6 years, or since it first launched on the App Store. And for me, the reason why we're doing this is Flipboard allows you to become the thought leader that you might not know that you could become. You can choose whatever topic that you want. So, you know, what we had over here was a passion board. Some people are interested in cooking, human rights, penguins. That's an awesome one. I know who that is. Advocates and influencers, music, social media, scuba, and exploring the world. So really whatever topic that you want. And with employee advocacy, not only are you curating content, but you have to figure out what content to curate and what topic, you know, what do you want to be known for? So the intersection of employee advocacy and Flipboard was kind of natural for me. And that's why I invited and created this event with Crystal and why you're all here. So just really appreciate you guys coming. So without further ado, I want to introduce our moderator for tonight, Josh. He works at Flipboard, and he will introduce our speakers for tonight. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Crystal, that was an awesome piece of employee advocacy. I really admired that. Let me call our panelists up. Let's see. Julie Hayes. There's Julie. Let's have a seat. Julie is from, I think I'll have everybody introduce themselves and say a little bit. Okay. Rhonda Hughes. Here's Rhonda. Rhonda, who had a longer commute than me. I live in Mill Valley. You live in Santa Rosa. Kind of crazy. Yeah. And Andrew Stoltzfus. The first book my wife and I ever wrote was called Shoe Fly Pie to Die, which was about Pennsylvania Dutch people, and we had people named Stoltzfus in it. Is that where your family's from? It is, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Are you from Pennsylvania? Cool. Me too. Dude, we'll talk afterwards. All right. All right. Well, why don't we start? Why don't we start with you, Julie? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, so everybody knows who everybody is?
I'm Julie Hayes with Autodesk. Autodesk is not a furniture company. We're not a car company. I always like to say that. We make software for people who make things. So, you know, your latest animated movie that you saw was probably designed in 3ds Max or Maya. Your Tesla car that you're driving was probably designed in Alias. The building that you work in was probably designed in Revit or AutoCAD. So, you know, we have millions of customers around the world that are using our software to imagine, design, and create a number of things that we as consumers consume every day, which is pretty cool. The group that I work with, we're focused on telling our story through PR, social media, the look and feel of the company, how employees in the world engage with our story, and I manage the brand advocacy group.
Great. And next we have Rhonda.
This thing on? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Hughes. I'm from Citrix. I'm the corporate social media manager. So my role is I'm the voice of Citrix in our social channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm also an internal consultant and educator on all things social media. So a big part of my role is in helping people within the company do social well, both from our Citrix social media practitioners, so people who manage a product account or things of that nature, and then also more broadly employees. So under that is our employee advocacy program.
Great. Andrew?
I'm Andy Stoltzfus. I'm with Voce Communications, which is work with Randy and a number of other people who have shown their lovely faces here. My role is heavily focused on digital support for our clients, especially in the tech space, which has meant a number of things over the years, everything from social media to paid advertising to this, that, and the other. And more recently, it's become increasingly a focus on employees as a way of expanding the reach of company content that you're creating and adding that layer of authenticity, that authentic voice, and being able to communicate a brand story to key stakeholders. So as part of that, I've led the charge to create a pilot program within Portavelli so that we can actually, Portavelli is the parent company to Voce, so that we can actually run this ourselves. And we've had a number of really interesting learnings. And I've been simultaneously working with a number of our clients across the country, trying to figure out how we can help them bring the voice of their employees to the forefront and communicate their brand story.
It strikes me when I hear you guys talk, I mean, everything is so much more sophisticated than the olden days when we had to mine all those zeros and ones by hand. But you guys, I remember, you know, when we started talking about this and we had our first sort of call about it, I didn't even know what employee advocacy meant. I mean, in the olden days, we called it evangelism. I remember the first time I heard it, it was in the context of Apple, which was like so rapidly going out of business, they had to pay some dude to walk around with a sandwich board and say, buy Apple, you know. Let's start with, what is a good working definition of employee advocacy? Why don't we start with that? And also, by the way, I should say, our goal here tonight is to be kind of brand agnostic, platform agnostic. We're not trying to sell anything to anybody here. We're looking for best practices. Mainly, I want to hear also about the train wrecks too. When we talk about employee advocacy, how does that differ from product evangelism? I think is the term of art, or does it differ? Or is it just a new piece of jargon to describe the same old function?
Okay. So yes and no to your question. I don't think it differs that much. I think the biggest difference is that it's more automated now. You know, there's a lot of platforms and learnings in the space that we're able to capitalize on, and so that is now brought to bear to us as marketers in a more sophisticated way. But you know, when we're actually training some of our salespeople on the notion of social selling, we actually say, you know, social selling is just selling. You know, it's not any different than the fax machine or the telephone. It's just using a tool, social media being the tool, and knowing that you have to add that into your sales toolkit. So I think from a marketing perspective, this notion of employee advocacy, there's this great fancy new term, you know, but it's no different than the sandwich board guy, you know, at the time, pre-social media. Now we're just capitalizing on the fact that, you know, 3 billion people in the world are on social media. Right. And so we want to automate that and harness that.
But the basic fundamental notion is that you work at a place, presumably you like working at the place, presumably you like the product, you eat your own dog food, and you're going to go out there and tell everybody how great it tastes.
We live in a world now, you know, a culture now where we feel more comfortable giving our employees permission to talk about the company they work for. And that, to me, is the differentiator. And then having the technology to automate it.
You guys have anything to add to that?
I think the thing that I would layer onto that is kind of what's in it for the employee, right? And there's two pieces. I define employee advocacy as communicating to and through an employee. So it also becomes a mechanism when done right for internal communications as well. And on the employee side, to kind of be smart, to keep up with the latest news about the company and more broadly in the industry, and to look smart in front of their, kind of do some personal branding. So when they're sharing things that reflect their area of expertise, more than just the company they work for, but also the industry in which they live, that becomes the kind of key part that has changed over time.
Okay, that raises a whole raft of questions for me, which we'll get to in a bit. But why don't we start with, how do you get started? Like, how do you, I mean, presumably there's a certain amount of grassrootsness to it, right? People, especially when they start at a place, they're full of vim and vigor for the product, and they're anxious to show everybody how much they love it. How do you encourage it? How do you inspire it? How do you get buy-in, you know, not only from the top down, but from the bottom up?
Sure. It's interesting how our program came about, because it was actually an idea from employees, which is maybe a little bit different than traditionally. So we started our program 3 years ago when I was actually in a different role as the community manager for one of our divisions, the SaaS division, which does GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, most of the products from Citrix that the general population knows that they're using. And so I would be promoting, you know, the content that our team was already creating, which was really fantastic. Things with Harvard Business Review, or bringing in thought leaders like Guy Kawasaki or Daniel Pink to speak on a webinar. And I would promote these through the GoToMeeting Facebook page or GoToMeeting Twitter. And I would see comments from our employees like, wow, this is fantastic. I didn't know about this and I want to share it. And so employees would reach out to me, where do I find this internally so that I can tell this story? Because the good thing about this, you know, particular role in the content that was being created is it is widely interesting and shareable for most business professionals. So topics about how to be a better presenter or a better manager or a better leader. And so there was, to your point about becoming, you know, kind of a thought leader or building your personal brand, there's a vested interest for employees who find this really interesting content in and of itself, but also being able to say, I work for this company. There's a little bit of bragging rights to that. And so from there, we built the case for a pilot. We started with 40 individuals within that division, and did a month-long pilot with the program that we had created, and saw really fantastic results in terms of content sharing. And then also we surveyed the pilot participants. Their feedback was incredible as well. And so we went to our executive sponsor at the time, who was the VP of that division, marketing VP in that division. And my initial thought was that we would scale the program by department. So we'd go to marketing and then sales, or something of that nature. And based on the results that she saw and the opportunity within this kind of program, she introduced and sent an email division-wide encouraging all people to be a part of it. So we went from very quickly a program of 40 participants scaling to the entire division. Shortly thereafter, I was promoted into a broader role within the corporate org. And so I had visibility within the global and within all of the business units. So we were able to then expand the program from there. So we have about 1,000 participants at this point.
And just to be clear, what is it exactly that they were doing, the people who are advocating on behalf of the company?
So that's actually a good question, because when you're asking about employee advocacy, it could be a lot of things. The way that we're talking about it, well, I'm talking about it today, is around content and news sharing. So that was really the goal of the program we originally set out, was really simple. Make the content and news happening about Citrix more visible to the broad employees, so they can share the things they find interesting. From there, we've actually evolved to more of this enabling employees to build their personal brand. But initially, it was all about sharing of content and news.
So it was very much an internal operation. It wasn't meant for people on the outside. They were kind of advocating inside the company and getting other people involved and aware of what was going on.
The content that they would share would be externally with their social network. So there is an external element in that way, yes.
Julie, what about you?
Yeah, we started with the pilot as well. I think it was sort of a risky idea. It was viewed as a risky idea, primarily by legal. And our executives said, okay, here's a little bit of money, go prove it out. So we started with 100 people in North America, and we never did a tops-down communication, at least within the first year we didn't. It was just word of mouth, so it grew organically, like, oh, the cool kids are doing it, you should, go check out this platform. Actually, within Autodesk, within the culture of Autodesk, programs like that sort of grow from the ground up, that are grassroots, are usually more successful than sort of the tops down, HR or executive type programs. So that would be a tip to all of you who might be thinking about launching a program. And in the first year, it grew organically, and then we also spent the time behind the scenes to build it out globally, to make sure that there was something there for every employee around the world. We have 97 offices in 37 countries, and so we didn't want it to just be North America focused. And 2 years later, we have 25% of our employees who are actively sharing this content externally. We, like you, are very focused on what's in it for them. So it's not just about driving the brand, it's about the personal brand and the thought leadership. And because of that, other strategic initiatives have spun out, like social selling and channel partners and what have you.
Yeah. Andy, I don't know, when I hear about a lot of this stuff, like my spidey sense starts to tingle a little bit, like especially like when I'm on Twitter or Facebook, something where people are saying what they think, and suddenly I'm being marketed to, or sometimes when we get an email from on high saying, hey, how about helping us spread the news on Twitter about this really neat thing that we're doing. We do it, but I always feel a bit like a shill. I always feel like I'm kind of retweeting something that's not in my words, and often I'll change it to my own words, but I still, when I'm on the receiving end of it, I'm a little suspicious of it when suddenly my friends start speaking a kind of a corporate speak, and I feel funny when I do it myself. So how do you kind of prevent that? How do you get everyone to do it sincerely and authentically and honestly?
Well, it all starts with, the way employee advocacy works with many of the programs and technologies that make it possible is there's people in the back end who are curating the content, who are finding that content, and those people can't be lazy. If they start to get lazy and just start putting press releases in there and saying, hey, love what we did today, company is great, that's not going to be valuable. No. So instead, when we started our program, we spent a lot of time kind of mapping what are the topics that are going to be interesting, not just to the people we want to participate, but to the networks that they have and that we want to be able to reach. And then there were about 7 topics that we kind of identified. Underneath that, what are the sources, the content sources that we want to be looking at, right? Industry publications, a lot of kind of thought leadership content within Medium, long form content on LinkedIn. Who are the authors we're looking at? And where are the places that we're creating our own content as Port of the Belly? And where are the gaps in that as well? Where is that too self-promotional? What are the guidelines of what we'll put in versus what we may not? Because
so you have guidelines. You say this is too self-promotional.
We do, yeah.
That's interesting. You guys have the same experience? I mean, I want to hear more about that. How do you ensure that the message is enthusiastic, authentic, doesn't feel like you're carrying somebody else's water,
A big part of, from our standpoint, it's been about training employees, really. I mentioned before that our program has evolved from these kind of newsletter-based content we're sending. As it grew, that wasn't really sustainable because we have such a diverse audience of employees that I couldn't necessarily present things that everybody cared about. And so with this new program and the way that we're kind of moving forward, it's about enabling employees to do this well. So it comes hand in hand with the training piece, which in retrospect, I actually wish I would have done more of in the beginning when we first enabled people with this kind of more personal brand related, kind of tool where they had access to this library of content. They could build sources external to themselves. So it wasn't just about Citrix. It still seems that when employees first get started, they do tend to gravitate to the Citrix content more than telling that full story. And so we're very big on the training element, and it's something I'm building out more of. The thing that I try to get most employees to come away with is create value, not noise. And when I explain that to them in kind of more, terms that you recognize and maybe get the aha moment of, it's everybody has people that they follow that when you see them in their feed, you automatically know that you trust them, the credibility of it. You click through every link they ever share because it's of quality, it's interesting. You have other people that you know that you probably share their content. I mean, don't share their content, you actually hide them because of the volume with which they're sending noise out there. And so, you know, in the past, it's been something that we've weaved into kind of more of the general education around the platform that we use and how do you get started. Going forward, it's something that we're building into its own education program because it's that important.
Yeah. Well,
I swap notes with you, by the way, on that, because I mean, I feel like training is one of the ways in which we could address the problem that you outlined, Josh. I think that the problem is here. It's a reality. It's not going away, regardless of like the gates or the boundaries you put in place. But training, I think, is probably like one of the leading ways that you can try and minimize that corporate shilling bill.
Yeah. Well, so does it ever? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Do you ever, Arrow ever not hit its mark? In fact, does it ever go really wide and somebody starts complaining? I mean, do you ever have situations where, with perhaps the best of intent, an employee goes out there to spread the good news about their company, and man, it just doesn't land? Because I know, you know, you were talking about how there are people who you follow, and you're just like, I love following this person, never a dull moment, and then suddenly it's like the Stepford wives steps in and they, you know, start trying to sell me something. And I was like, where's the dude I was following? You know, like, go away, marketing person, come back.
You know, I would say about once a quarter, I usually get an email from someone who says, you know, I saw the same tweet or the same LinkedIn post from 2 or 3 different Autodeskers, right? Because you put in sort of the suggested share text, and some people are lazy and they don't, you know, write in their own voice. They're just like, this sounds great, let me share. I'll get a note from someone that says, I saw the same thing from 2 or 3 people. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. I mean, if somebody has 60 friends at Autodesk, they're probably going to see a repeat tweet somewhere. Either, you know, they might have 60 friends at Autodesk because they used to work there, or because they're one of our expert elites, and so they, you know, are a product advocate or something. But that's the anomaly, you know, that person who has so many Autodeskers in their network. When you think about the World Wide Web, you know, and just the algorithms at play that we have no control over, the likelihood of a lot of people seeing the same exact tweet from an Autodesker is pretty minimal. So there, yes, it's you know, something I'm not excited about, but it's not a significant problem.
Okay, so that's like a really good little bit of detail. Like, one thing that drives people crazy is when they see the same thing retweeted by 12 different wives. So, and I know that all of you at one point or another during the last 15 minutes have mentioned the need for training. Some more of that. Like, what else do you tell them? How do you keep an employee from unintentionally hurting the brand?
Well, I think having a system of approved content in the first place helps a lot.
I'm sorry, a system of
approved content, right? So you've got stuff that's in this, you're curating, you're putting out there that people can use. I've had clients who start conversations about employee advocacy and say, well, we're a conservative company. We don't really want our employees active on social media. They might say something that will be harmful to us. They might inadvertently disclose something. They might say something negative.
Okay, so got that. When you say, and I quickly think, okay, everybody's got to, and then we're back where Julie said. So approved content is what? We kind of define the boundaries, and you can say it in your own words.
Right. Yeah. Approved content, I guess, it's the type of material that is in there. The topics that are fair game versus the topics that are not. And the training part goes into explicitly stating this is not fair game. But by the mere nature of having things that are fair game, that are available and accessible and people can understand, and the boundaries in everybody's head become more clear than they would be if it's just a presentation. You get up in front of them and tell them here's right, here's wrong, but then they forget about it a month later. Kind of having guide rails goes a long way that are there for them every day.
Okay.
We actually at Citrix have a global social media policy that all employees have to take as part of their compliance. And so, again, it's kind of the guide rails. And then once you're part of a program like our employee advocacy program, there is further training. You know, I kind of talk about with the, you know, we have suggested content for our top priority things. And I try to train employees. That's the first place you want to start. You know, add a hashtag that is relevant, that gets you broader reach if you're sharing to Twitter. Add the handle of the author of the piece of content. Hey, maybe even take another step and tell them why you liked it. But the more that you can customize that social copy that you're creating and pull out why you cared about the article and why you would even share it with your followers, the more valuable it's going to be. And they can actually see this within their own analytics. And so I do get feedback from employees about, wow, it was really cool. I shared this actually multiple times, but I see that when I worded it this way and I pulled the quote out instead of just using the header, like I got this much more engagement. And so I think, you know, back to the training thing, it's really key.
Yeah, no, I know that the people I follow tend to be, you know, pretty edgy, and that's what stands out in social media. Somebody who's just going blah, 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 I'm not that interested in. But somebody who says something that makes me laugh or something that's cutting, that tends to work pretty well. So how do you handle humor? How do you handle edginess when it comes to the company message?
I think when you get into the space where your social media policy allows employees to share their excitement and their passion for the company, you can't micromanage it. You know, so at a high level, I think, you know, your employees should always make sure within their profile that they say tweets are my own, you know, that I work here. But, you know, no company I think today has the resources to police, you know, everything that an employee says. And so you really kind of have to, you know, remove the leash, if you will. And, you know, if an incident happens, which thankfully in 2 years, an incident hasn't happened for us.
Not one, you know, not one incident.
Not anything that's been negative. I mean, like I said, just someone who might say, oh, I've seen a couple of people post the same thing. But to me, that's, you know, table stakes.
And you two, no train wrecks between you guys?
Not related to this program, but you have to remember my role is the corporate social media manager. So I see more of that than probably you do in your role.
More of that, you mean at other companies? Well,
no, more of just generally employees engaging in social media. I see what they're posting outside of Citrix, outside of this program.
Right.
And so there's never been anything related to the program that caused some red flags.
Right, because we've all heard these horror stories of, you know, people who are in PR communications and they say something very untoward and they get on an airplane and they land someplace and
they're fired.
People are like setting fire to the airplane, and you know that's kind of scary stuff. I mean, you can really.
But those are usually on corporate branded channels,
right.
You know, where they manage a brand channel and they thought they were logged into their personal channel. Oops.
Or suddenly they decided to speak on behalf of themselves, not their companies.
Right.
So
we always make it clear to our participants that this is their personal brand. You know, this isn't the Autodesk brand. It is a reflection on the Autodesk brand for sure. And we want to manage that as well. But this is first and foremost their personal brand.
It's weird because I know that a lot of people, like on my Twitter account, for instance, I say opinions 100% my own because I don't want my drunk tweeting to reflect poorly on my employer.
I'm going to follow you now.
But you know, but you do go back and forth, right? Because like, reflect on my own. But sometimes I'm going to say something really great about Flipboard.
The more frequent kind of concern that I see working with a number of clients who run social media programs, I won't name the client, but they've had a competitor that's always goading them. It's always trying to instigate fights and kind of engaging in provocative trolling.
What should be talking about?
And the client tries to always take the high ground, right? They don't want to engage because it also gives more credibility to the brand that's trying to ride their coattails. Right. But every now and then you get a salesperson, it's usually a salesperson, who gets in there and just starts fighting. And you see the fight going on Twitter, and it's bad, right? There's no winners. There's nothing good that's going to come out of it. And those become we've got to shut it down. How do we get in front of the person who is that salesperson?
And how do you?
You find them, email them, call them, tell them back off, and then go tell their teams, hey, this is not the type of behavior to continue engaging. And this is, when you see that, we understand, right? It's inflammatory, it's wrong, it's misleading, all those things. But let's approach it from a strategic perspective.
Stay calm.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and there's also part of the training with broad employees is that, yes, you're sharing things on behalf of the company, but you're not a spokesperson unless you've been trained to be. So making that differentiation as, you know, making sure that it's always clear that you work for Citrix because that's part of your profile, you're sharing the content, and that your opinion is your own. So
good. Let me ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to you all for questions. How do we define success when we create these sorts of programs and campaigns? Is it numbers of tweets? Do we track it? Or is it not something that we should really try and quantify?
Well, I think in order to secure and keep budget, you have to have those metrics that align to the business goals. Otherwise, you know,
You're talking to yourself.
right. How would you ever get executive buy-in? And so I think that's typically why I see these programs sitting in marketing, is because the typical metrics that you can get off of this would be, you know, number of content shares kind of thing, or number of clicks, number of engagements, number of, you know, traffic back to the website, which are aligned directly to the broader marketing goals.
What do those numbers even mean? I mean, when you go to your CMO or your CEO and you say, hey, there were 67,322 shares of this.
Yeah.
What is somebody supposed to make of that? How do you convert that to money?
Advertising savings.
Earned media.
Yeah, earned media, exactly. I think, you know, a lot of the branded channels are making it more and more difficult for corporate brands to, you know, surface their ads. And so it coming through the everyday consumer, you know, the friend in your network potentially, you know, has the likelihood of being seen more so than, you know, an ad that you bought. So I think that's compelling. I totally agree with you, Rhonda. Like, you have to have the numbers in order to keep the program, you know, funded and what have you. I think there's also this really nice secondary, you know, way of looking at it. And for us, it's really, how is this moving the culture of our company forward? Because our company is going through a tremendous evolution right now. And so getting our employees more connected to the story, to who we are, where we're going, to how our customers are using our products in these phenomenal ways, has had, to me, a very intangible yet measurable, you know, effect and benefit, in addition to the virality and the size of the community and the shares and the earned media value and that sort of thing.
And yeah, your point about the ad value is critically important, because you pay X and you get Y impressions. Well, now you've paid less than X and you've gotten the same impressions, but more importantly, they're authentic. People pay attention to it because it's coming from people. That goes a long way. The other piece is, by putting it into context, you know, this was generated this many pieces of engagement. Well, how does that compare to our corporate social channels, how they're doing on their own? Right after 30 days, what we looked at when our own program, right at the beginning, we generated 4 times more engagement points than our corporate social channels did during that period of time.
They probably didn't like learning that, did they?
Well,
there's this nice tension that we have with our social media group.
It's all house right here, though. So for me, it's a little internal war, maybe. I mean, one of the things that I've always seen about it is that it's often a different audience than what our corporate channels. And we're in a tech space, so Citrix is, you know, our typical buyer is the IT admin, the CIO, the XO kind of, and so the people that are connected to our employees, it's a very different audience, and it's actually created the need to kind of think about the content we're creating specifically for our employee audience to tell that story, because our standard content may be more tech focused than I would surely ever share with my, you know, LinkedIn profile, because who would care about what's going on with Zen Mobile? You know, but you may want to know about the stories about how Citrix enables people to work from home. You know, I personally have worked from home for 9 years with Citrix. So that's a story that a lot of employees might share. And from not even the marketing standpoint, more on the talent acquisition and getting new employees, as this is a really great place to work. You know, there are other benefits outside of marketing.
Yeah, and that's another key point. The areas where we've seen a number of kind of unexpected pieces of value are talent acquisition, right? We've seen increase 2.8 times more views to our company job descriptions, right? Which is, we're trying to recruit talent, always trying to, that goes a long way towards more exposure, because people are seeing their former colleagues, their connections, whatever sort, are just more active. Well, let me see, what are they up to? Oh, they're at Port of the Valley. Oh, are they hiring? You know, you kind of connect all the dots there. The other thing that's been interesting is seeing some of the, you can kind of analyze sometimes who is engaging with their content. You start to see people at organizations that are prospects, and say, well, that's an extra value right now, because we're trying to, you know, work with them and trying to find a way to you know, make them clients. And that conversation goes a long way.
I just thought of one more question. As an employee advocate, I guess the CEO can be an employee advocate too, right?
Yeah.
Who tends to be better, the CEO or somebody who works for the CEO as an advocate? You know, I'm really thinking about Trump here.
Trump is a social media maverick. I mean, come on. We may not agree with his politics, but
But he knows how to pull the levers and stay in the public. Yeah.
Well, on the other hand, you've got people like Aaron Levy, right, who are very active, very influential, and using Twitter in particular to really build their reputations and their organization's reputations and say very smart things in many cases.
You know, I don't view our C-suite any different than I view the average employee at Autodesk. You know, if you want to do it, do it. And, you know, and be authentic when you're doing it.
Are they harder to train? Or are they harder to keep within the guidelines?
I mean, I think some executives at Autodesk really have an appetite for it and they're excited to learn it. You know, they're a student of social media. I mean, we've taken some executives to LinkedIn and to Twitter and to Facebook to be trained, you know, because they view it as a valuable medium, not just for Autodesk, but for themselves personally. And some executives are not into it, and I don't want you on it. You know, like if you're not into it, like don't do it because you hold a position in the company and you feel like you should.
Right.
You know, do it because you're excited about it.
Right, which sounds like is sort of the general guideline anyway, is do it because you feel it, don't do it because I'm telling you to do it. Yeah. All right, great. How's about some questions from you all? Yes.
My name is Irene and I'm a PR consultant. So I actually wrote an article last year about a very interesting case. I don't know if you guys remember a crisis at Amazon following the New York Times article. So there was an employee that actually responded to that with a big opinion piece on LinkedIn. And New York Times picked it up again. So he kind of generated this whole wave of coverage for them. And I wrote about it and how the social media policies, you know, should be probably updated for cases like that. And there was recently another case with an ex-Yahoo employee that wrote a really great piece about Marissa that was also picked up by Business Insider, I think. And, you know, Marissa responded to that on Twitter. So anyway, the funny thing was the employee actually even wrote me and said, oh, I read your article. Good stuff. But, you know, even though both pieces were really positive and employees were defending their companies, they basically did act as spokespeople. And it can work well for the companies or not. For Amazon, it did work pretty well because even the CEO referenced it in a global email to all employees, saying the New York Times article may not have been so, you know, true that even employees feel like defending it. But what's your take on that? How is this differentiation between posting the approved content versus posting a big opinion piece in defense of the company? Like, how is that reflected in the social media policies? How do you train employees to prevent that or to encourage that? So what are your takes on that?
Go on and on and on. It's not 140 characters. They could do a lot of damage or they could do a lot of good.
I guess it would depend on whether it was good or bad, on how you would move forward with it. I don't have a really strong answer for that, actually. I mean, in our global social media policy, we do outline, you know, do no harm and that kind of stuff. But you know, our blog is actually written by all employees. We do have a review process, but you know, as one of the 9,000 some odd employees for Citrix, you can author any post about anything that you want. Hopefully it's tied to the business and the things that we do. But I mean, I think you had mentioned before about how in the age of social media, you kind of have to set the guidelines and hope that people work within it. And luckily I've never been in a circumstance where I had to, you know, deal with something like that. But it's an interesting question. I don't know if you have experience.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, that's a reflection of the world we live in today. I mean, anybody can say anything they want anywhere. And so in that instance, you're immediately as a company put in a reactive position. I mean, you can't anticipate that that's going to happen. You outline your social media policy and you hope that there's no disgruntled employee. But I don't compare that scenario at all to the employee advocacy program or you know, category that we're kind of talking about today. I think that's a public relations nightmare. I don't think it's an example of good or bad advocacy, I guess.
But if you're using an employee advocacy program to your point earlier, Julie, to foster a positive culture, understand what the company's vision is, understand what they're trying to accomplish, in theory, that will come through when somebody's writing something on their own, even if they're going to, and maybe inspire somebody to go to bat for the company when they may not have otherwise. Right. It's not going to necessarily solve for the person who wants to go write the memoirs of how terrible it was, but it may help inspire a an organic reaction in response if that were to happen.
Right. Let's hope that Autodeskers think about going to Glassdoor or Blind.
Or I think of my friend Dan Lyons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole book. Did pretty well, actually. Yes. I'm sorry, the what engagement? Oh, yeah, C-suite engagement.
Hi, my name is Deanne Vaness. So I'm a consultant, typically working with smaller companies. And in my experience, I've seen if the CEO or one of the top leaders in the C-suite engages, the employees love that and are inspired to do so. If not, you may as well give up the fight, I feel like. And so I'm looking for what is some of your advice in how to engage a CEO who's totally not comfortable.
That was
with
actually
these
one
channels.
of the questions that I didn't ask, but it's a great question. How do you get CEO buy-in or C-suite buy-in?
And not just buy-in, more than lip service, but actual participation.
So
How much can I say? I mean, we're in a big organization, so we actually have executive comms people that work with our executive suite, who are there to be that kind of voice of reason with them and explain what the value of social is. And it's actually been something in the last few years that I've seen a huge shift in, where, you know, before none of our executives are, now they're all on Twitter, and, you know, to varying degrees of, not success, but what's the other word I'm looking for? To varying degrees of maturity, I would say. That's probably not the right word either, but, you know, there's some that are more comfortable with curating their own content, and other places as a starter place to get them active is you could curate content on their behalf and send them to, you know, as kind of a shortened list of here's some things that you might want to talk about, or kind of coaching them through it. I mean, when it comes down to it, CEOs, C-suite, they're people, and, you know, you kind of have to understand what it is that they want to get out of it. And in some cases, people don't want to be on Twitter. And there's actually, if you were to ask me if an executive wasn't going to put all of the time and energy into connecting and responding and being part of the Twitterverse, then maybe that's not the right space for them to be.
Can't bring himself to, so you're saying there are CEOs who understand it, but they can't do it, and they can't do it because they don't have the time, or they're nervous, any number of those reasons. Yeah, that's what you were talking about. The word you were looking for was comfort. Yeah.
Don't you think employees would be able to see through that? I mean, that a CEO is, you know, feeling forced.
I think if the CEO is not comfortable, one, there are steps you can take to try to increase that level of comfort, but there are going to be situations where that CEO is not the right person to be the spokesperson. So then you look at who's another executive that we can make that flagship kind of model that people want to replicate, to understand, to pay attention to. And if it's coming from someone at the top, even if it's not the CEO, that kind of has the same impact, the same effect on the employee base. And short of that, right, you can find an evangelist, you know, who's ahead of a product, or maybe not an executive level, but who's super active and, you know, has a lot of, you know, maybe it's somebody who's really naturally funny. And so they're saying things that are interesting and engaging and interesting, which I've seen a couple of my clients do and worked with them to kind of then raise that voice, raise that profile, make them kind of not the public spokesperson, but somebody that employees can rally behind and say, this is, I'm going to pay attention to him or her, and I'm going to follow them. I'm going to share what they're saying, and I'm going to, if I feel like it is something that I want to do personally, try to emulate them. And I think that goes a long way.
And if that doesn't get the CEO to step up his or her game, I don't know what would.
Other questions? Hi, my name's Chris Cox. in your training, how much do you encourage or allow employees to actually create their own content about the organization and the brand rather than just sharing your curated content? And do you measure that alongside measuring the curated content spread? You do.
Within our program, employees are allowed to submit content, and in fact, it's quite a great source for us in terms of the content. We can't be the eyes and ears to everything happening. Not all of that content is original content they've created. I've seen a lot of people do the LinkedIn, self-publishing, I forgot what it's called, but where they write like a long form article. So there's less investment than like trying to start their own blog and water the blog with 3 or 4 blog posts a week to get the traffic. So I think we see a lot of original LinkedIn pieces. We welcome those if they are relevant to the business, if it's quality content. Not everybody's a great writer, not everyone is on message. So I'd say about maybe 5 to 10% of our content is original content coming from an individual employee, not like a marketing team or earned media. And we encourage it. Like we say, we don't put a lot of guidelines out there. We want to just get what they want to send us in, and then we'll see how it maps to our content strategy.
We're an agency, so our product is our people. So we want to be showcasing what our people have to say. So we're constantly trying to go, sometimes pulling teeth to be able to make it happen, but trying to encourage people to write content that is long form, that is about an area that they're an expert in. And we found that in order to encourage people to do that, we need to provide kind of a prompt, provide a topic of the month that is interesting, provide a kind of something that gets them to start thinking rather than just saying, we need more content, help, right? That's not going to go so far. But if you say, hey, we want to really focus on, CSR initiatives this month and what you've seen, what you've worked with your clients to do, what you've done, in your office to go volunteer in your community. That's a starting point, right? Then people take it and they write content and they produce it and we share it on our company blog, right? So it has a place to live, and that becomes, more than just a tweet that somebody's sharing that's curated from a third party. It becomes something that we can rally around, something that we can build our own kind of content engine around, and stuff that then employees across the organization can share in an authentic way.
Did you say CSR? What is that?
Corporate social responsibility.
Sorry.
I think it also generates a lot of, you don't have that at Flipboard?
No, we don't. We do. Flipboard does. I have it.
Okay. I think it generates actually a lot of personal pride too. When they see their piece that they wrote not only make it onto whatever your platform is, but gets shared by other employees, kind of it's like, hey, this is really cool. I want to share it with my network. And then it makes them want to just continue to improve their future, content submissions as well. So, we love being able to hold some original content up from someone in our community and publish it and give them that sense of pride and kind of make them a rock star.
So, yes, in the back.
I have a sort of different kind of opinion. Because we are in high-tech industry, think about that. How much per hour a CEO of any public company or unicorn startup they can make? So I don't think they should waste their time. Even any employee should waste their time on doing things like that. I can give you an example. For our company.
I'm sorry, your company is what?
Yeah. Our company, we have been tweeting 2 million tweets during past 2 years. So we're a robot. So it's a bot. We never log into our social media account, Twitter account.
And I'm sorry, what company are you from, sir?
My own.
Oh.
So that means you can not only save your company's money and time, and also those tweets are distinct, which means non-repeated. So we may think from different kind of angle,
How old is your company right now?
A consulting firm like a dozen years, being a dozen years.
Yeah. And so you don't see any value to just saying things about what your company is
except you are a celebrity like Donald Trump or a Docker founder. Last month they had a public debate on Twitter discussing whether Docker should dominate the container standard or not.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of doing a private meeting or whatever, they are publicly debating on Twitter.
Which you think is a bad idea?
I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
because it's like, it's like, it's not a good idea because Twitch, it's visible to the whole world.
So that's kind of an interesting perspective. One you don't hear as much these days anymore, but like keep it to yourself. Don't be out there tooting your own horn. What do you all think of that? Apparently you don't think that's a good idea. But I mean, there's certainly some interesting merit to it. It's hard to contain, it can go off the rails, right? Yeah.
I mean, the point that I would agree with is it is not appropriate for every person to be super active on Twitter, on Facebook, on whatever, insert whatever channel here, right? Not everybody is built to or meant to or wants to be spending their time sharing what they're doing, talking about their company, talking about them. But there are those who are interested, and when you make it easy, and so it doesn't take a lot of time, it's very simple and straightforward and kind of something you can do as you're waiting for the bus or waiting, anything else, yeah.
And I would add to that, I mean, for the purpose of this conversation, we've been talking about employee advocacy in terms of content sharing, but from a value to the business kind of angle, it's not just about pushing out content, it's about getting the insights about what your customers are saying, what your competitors are saying. So from like a product standpoint or a small business standpoint, it's about listening and engaging with people that are talking about you or about the space that you're in. So I think of that as kind of separate than what we would do under an employee advocacy program, but because I'm in social, I felt like I had to say that.
All right, how about one more question? Well, there's a whole bunch of, well, actually, let's get somebody who hasn't asked a question yet. There's two people behind you.
Advocacy and internal comms. Is there any overlap? Are you starting to use this as a company newsletter? Or are they more siloed? Like how is that working? Just out of curiosity.
We work really closely with our employee comms. So as of right now, they're two separate efforts, but a lot of the things that we publish within our intranet, stories about Citrix and what's happening, we also publish externally because we want people to tell the story for us, especially more from like a talent acquisition and the behind the scenes, what we call Citrix Life. So that kind of content hasn't traditionally lived on the blog, but from efforts around employee advocacy, we see the value of having it there. So there is overlap in there. There's other employee advocacy kind of programs. So in encouraging employees to share the photos and their experience of what it's like to work in a place, it falls under the employee advocacy kind of umbrella in my thought, but it's not necessarily what we're talking about today in terms of content sharing.
I think for us, we've been around for 34 years, so we have a lot of legacy platforms. So we have an intranet site that produces or shares a lot of news about the company. Our program, which we call Bonfire, isn't in place of our intranet. We do choose some high value communication specific for employees that we share on Bonfire. They're non-shareable pieces of content. So let's say our CEO did an all hands or something and it was recorded. So we will actually publish that, but an employee can only view it. They're not able to share it. And so we use Bonfire as just another distribution channel for our employee comms effort. We've got this great intranet site that unfortunately, isn't going away. But I could see, a younger company or a startup actually use these types of employee advocacy platforms that are in market today to do both, to create a social sharing space, but to also provide the typical intranet that companies have today. We just don't do that.
I mean, not to oversimplify, but one key component of internal comms is making sure you can find ways to get the information, news, updates you want in front of employees in a way that they will digest. They're not going to the internet if they're not opening emails. Integrating that with an employee advocacy program can be a valuable way where if you're already putting content in there that people want to share, that people want to read, that people are using as a resource, and then you're also, enabling them to find out what's going on with the company in the same place. It helps supplement some channels and mechanisms that people may not pay as much attention to as they may have once done.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one place that our employees go to get information. We've got our intranet's built on SharePoint. We have Slack. We also have Bonfire. We just recently launched a closed Facebook group. I mean, we have so many different channels. So it's just like, let's just spread it across, and hope that someone gets it at some point based on where they go.
Question.
Hi, I'm Stacy from GoDaddy, and I manage our employee advocacy program. And I'm curious if any of the rest of you doing this in corporate have crossed this bridge and what solutions you have. As I'm empowering our employee advocates and influencers to go out there and meet all of our great customers in the field, there occasionally becomes a thing where we're sort of out on a limb, stuck holding the bag, if you will, for a negative support experience that we have no control over as a member of a particular silo that we happen to find ourselves in. Any creative solutions for that?
Anything from a Citrix standpoint?
I'm trying to think in terms of employee advocacy. So it's part of an employee advocacy program and they go on site to meet with customers, or can you clarify
Like
that?
I'm here. I just invited one of our employee influencers who I met through a Twitter chat to come to this very event. And she's had a great experience, but I've had other employees, customers that I've met at events like this, and we're big right now on sending our brand ambassadors out to real life events to meet people in real life, not just on social media. And so occasionally you end up in this very uncomfortable experience where you're now trying to usher this person through the support channels, and you don't really have the authority to make mountains move, so to speak, for this particular influencer that you might become acquainted with in real life.
So you're sending someone out to represent the company, but they don't have the information to answer the question?
Not the information. So
Okay.
for example, here, I'll give you a tangible example. GoDaddy has partnered with WordPress, powers 25% of the internet. So we go out to WordCamps and we're sending people who are not on the social media team out to WordCamps. And there are obviously bad support experiences for every company. So how do we hook those ambassadors who we're newly empowering through the employee advocacy program up with a way to kind of finesse the issue without creating a dedicated support channel for the people that are meeting these employee
So be more tangible. You send somebody out to a WordPress camp and somebody goes, you know, I tried to use GoDaddy and I tried to register my name and something bad happened.
Yep.
And so the brand ambassador ought to be able to handle that, right? I think it's going back to what you're alluding to. Aren't they trained to deal with that sort of thing?
It depends. If it's a product person who's building one of our products, you know, it's great that they're out there in the field getting this feedback directly, but they may not be the person who has the power to change the policy that could rectify the situation of that particular customer.
And they don't have some kind of thing that they say, which is like, wow, this is great feedback, I'm going to take it back. And
well, and we do that. Obviously we do that, but legitimately I would like to, and you know, our support organization is our chief value proposition in the market. So we're very well known for excellent support experiences, but even given that, we're a growing organization and we have growing pains like everyone else. So when I go to our support org, they say, hey, you know, we don't want to create a separate channel for these friends of your employee advocates, because our support is gold standard. So just tell them to call into support. So I'm kind of looking for creative solutions. How do you kind of come up with a hybrid of a way to give your ambassadors who are going out there and representing the company some way to at least extend an olive branch to someone who has had a bad experience, even though they want to advocate for the brand?
Your problem sounds very unique, and I haven't experienced that firsthand at Autodesk, but just riffing here off the top, I mean, could you give your brand champions an exclusive 1-800 number or an exclusive chat room or email alias to your support group? So they're not just sending these people they meet face-to-face into the typical GoDaddy funnel of support. They're sending them to this high touch, I met this person at an event, you need to prioritize this over your typical support funnel. I'm just riffing, but I don't know.
I'm thinking the same way.
Okay.
Or if there's already a, those who meet a higher threshold have a different 800 number that it's not necessarily you building some completely new channel, but it's the existing, right, the gold desk.
Yeah, it just seems like you need to add another pipe in your plumbing. I mean, you know, I don't.
I like your analogy.
So it sounds like you're not experiencing that in your programs where any of your employee advocates are kind of bearing the brunt of something that's really outside of their
You're talking about kicking over a rock and something untoward jumps out. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question.
It is.
You are opening yourself up when you're saying, my company's great. And somebody goes, no,
I think what's great is that you're actually identifying people you want to send out into the field to interact with customers or potential customers. We've actually talked a lot about that at Autodesk, and we're scared to pull the trigger. So, you know, and I think your scenario maybe highlights one of the reasons why we're a little risk averse in that area, because maybe we don't have some of our back end stuff ready to accommodate those challenges. So, I mean, kudos to you. You're ahead of the game. But I can't relate to it in terms of my program.
The worst possible scenario for that would be, somebody saying, I've had this support problem, and then the employee ambassador says, yeah, we've been having problems with our support team recently. That would be the worst possible scenario. So as you're, if you've got a few things that you kind of have in mind that you know from experience or things that they may face, before you go send your employee advocates out into the wild, if you will, right? Giving them just a few reminders. I know you know this, you're smart. That can go a long way.
And having that process in place. So maybe you haven't worked it out yet, but getting, your customer support team, whoever, if you're the manager of this brand ambassador program, just talk through this. I mean, you guys are obviously, based on this program, very customer centric. The fact that you have such a great support org. So it's just figuring out that process for your brand ambassadors to follow, for getting them the support that they need, but then also, what is the problem that they're finding, and is this a common reoccurring issue? How do you feed that back into the business so that they can make change in that way?
You guys have been charming and brilliant, and if I ever go out into the field, I'm going to call you first. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thanks to our panelists.
Josh, what's your Twitter handle? What's your Twitter handle? I want to follow you. Oh, there you are. Okay, all right.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. And I think you guys are going to stick around in case there's some more. I'm sorry you didn't get